fellas, as always, we're gonna talk about the ingredients list in this here session, right? Now, I wanted to go ahead and compile this one together because, you know, with when you look at food items and stuff, right? Essentially, you know, we all have a tendency to look at the nutrition facts, which is important, but I think the one thing we may forget sometimes is the ingredients list, okay? Because ingredients on the back of items that you see, you know what I'm saying, on the items that we pick up in our, you know, grocery stores, you know, things that we eat every day, you know, sometimes we don't pay enough attention to those. And the ingredients also, you know, just like the nutrition facts, ingredients have a tendency to determine, like, you know, sometimes how bad something is or how good something might be too, just depending, right? Because that's not always the case. You know, I try to, on this channel, maintain that there's nuance with everything, right? So, you know, certain ingredients in trace amounts aren't really gonna hurt you that much. It's when you consume, you know, excessively that you may have to worry. But I wanna go over some of our common ingredients, right? And some of the common items that we drink in our everyday, you know, diets, right? So I wanna start with our common items, right? As you can see, some of these are drinks, some of these are food items, right? You got Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew. Those are some of our drinks that a lot of us love to, you know, consume. Some chips, right? So we got Doritos, Lay's, and Ruffles. And we got some candy ranging from Hershey's, you know, Reese's and Kit Kats, things like that. Certain ice cream varieties, and then we also have some cereals that I'm gonna go over. So some of those will get mentioned as I go over the ingredients that are in, you know, a lot of these items. So I'm gonna go over some of the ingredients that are common in our diets. I'm gonna start with this one. It's abbreviated HFCS. It's high fructose corn syrup. So now a lot of y'all know that high fructose corn syrup exists in a lot of these items, especially the common ones, the sodas that I mentioned, even some of the chips. High fructose corn syrup essentially is best way to describe it is it's like there's an enzyme that helps convert syrup over to fructose. Now, just as a slight reminder, fructose is a monosaccharide. It's a type of carbohydrate that's naturally occurring in fruits. Okay, so essentially though, what happens with high fructose corn syrup, in trace amounts, they may not be bad for you, but if you excessively consume, high fructose corn syrup is considered an added sugar, which, you know, as I've maintained in these videos, is something that you want to try to reduce. You know, I don't even want to say take away because, you know, let's be real. You know, we all have our guilty pleasures, right? And some of those include candy, you know, things like that, which contain some of these ingredients that, you know, you don't want to excessively consume. But, you know, because it's an added sugar has been linked to diabetes and obesity as well as liver disease. So you do want to make sure that you're mindful about how much you consume. High fructose corn syrup, as you can imagine, provides sweetness to foods and drinks, okay? Citric acid is yet another one. It's found in citrus fruits. It gives it kind of like a sour taste. I guess is really the word I'm looking for, not so much sweet, but it gives it more of a sour taste. And you'll find them in, like, you know, lemons and limes and things like that, which, you know, I didn't write it up here, but Sprite, right? Sprite is a lemon lime drink. Citric acid is, you know, is found in that. And so citric acid is also found, believe it or not, in some of our seasonings that we may use. Even the Dash, which is one of my favorites, like the lemon pepper, for example. Dash lemon pepper has citric acid inside of it. I mean, it's a lemon pepper, right? So it only makes sense. Like I said, it's not bad for you, you know, in trace amounts, but excessively, you know, if you consume it a lot, because it's acid, it could rot your teeth. So you do want to be mindful about how much you consume there. Artificial sweeteners, there are a few. What I have here is like aspartame, sucralose, acesulfame K, and et cetera, right? The one I want to go over is sucralose, because that's the one we do see a lot of. You know, some aspartame could be found in certain yogurts and things like that, but sucralose is like, you know, it's sucrose essentially, right? Again, it's another type of carbohydrate. It's a sugar. But sucrose, if I remember right, what happens is there's 3 hydroxyl groups that get replaced with 3. I'm sorry, it's not coming to me right now, but there's 3 hydroxyl groups, right? And then they end up getting replaced. It makes it sucralose, okay? And sucralose is, like Splenda, for example, is a type of sucralose. Sugar substitute, right? It's an alternative type of sugar. So, and it's the type of sugar that, you know, adds about like a 600% sweetness to a food or to, you know, any, you know, drink or what have you. Like maybe you use Splenda in coffee. Sucralose is it's kind of funny, right? Like sucralose, because it's still, you know, a type of sugar and it's sweet, you still want to be mindful, like it can rot your teeth and things like that. But sucralose though, it's not broken down by digestive enzymes, meaning it can't absorb its calories. So, you know, again, in trace amounts, I would still say just be mindful of that. Consume it in trace amounts, but not so much, you know, in excess, right? Natural flavors. So obviously natural flavors are exactly like they sound, okay? To go over, like, say, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, a caramel flavoring is added to those drinks. It's added to give it the texture that you see, right? And, you know, conversely, Mountain Dew, Sprite, lemon lime is added to those drinks to give those the textures you see, to give them the looks that you see, okay? Now, next we have sodium citrate, and this is mostly for Sprite, to be honest with you. It's essentially used as a preservative, and it just, you know, the tartness in it, okay? And it can also be used as a anticoagulant in certain medicines, okay? You know, and also an antacid, by the way, too. It has different, you know, purposes, right? Medicine, drinks. Obviously, if you, in drinks, I mean, sodium citrate is something you still want to be mindful of anyway. Obviously, if you're using it as a medicine, or if it's in one of the medicines that you may take, right, anticoagulant or antacid or whatever, be mindful of the dosage. But conversely, when you're drinking a lot of soda, you know, you still want to be careful not to do so, not to drink a lot of soda. You know what I'm saying? You do want to limit that too. So just to keep that in mind, you know, sodium citrate, you know, because it has different purposes, you know, extra special care should be taken with that one. We're gonna go over the artificial dyes. Now, there are three I wanna go over, right? Again, most common ones, red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. Now, red 40, some of the, you know, items that red 40 is found in would be like, say, Skittles, M&Ms. If you ever see like the red ones specifically, red 40 is likely used to color those. And then you also have, you know, some fruit punch drinks, nacho cheese Doritos, and Code Red Mountain Dew, okay? Now, the thing about red 40 though is it has been, well, I'm gonna say it may be linked to hyperactivity and behavioral issues, especially in children. So you do want to be mindful about that, right? It's forced them to create warning labels on certain foods. In California, as a matter of fact, a law has passed that by, I believe, the year 2028, red 40 is to be eliminated from all school lunches and school diets. So that should tell you, you know, I guess how dangerous red 40 can be if you're not mindful about its consumption. Now we go into yellow 5, right? Now yellow 5 is used in Mountain Dew, just as an example. You know, there's some other drinks, some candies, right? Some of the same candies I already mentioned, that being M&M's, Skittles, the yellow kind, right? So anytime you see yellow 5, yellow 6, you think about the yellow candies or, you know, yellow drinks, things like that. And also they're even used in certain cereals, which is why I wrote cereals here too. Lucky Charms, Fruit Loops, just to go over some. Now you're looking at also some of the same issues though in overconsumption, right? In excess, you're looking at hyperactivity and certain behavioral issues, especially in adolescence, right? And it can even cause some allergies. So, you know, you do want to be mindful about that. Maybe as an adult, you know, it might not have much of an effect on you. When it comes to the dyes, you know, likely what's the main focus is the adolescents, right? It's the young children. And last we have yellow 6. Using some of the same foods that I mentioned, but I also want to add in Jolly Ranchers, you know, even some Airheads, nacho cheese chips, you know, Jello, cakes, cookies, Gatorade. You get the picture, right? There's a lot. Same thing, hyperactivity in children. But the thing with yellow 6 though is there's more research is needed on this one. But it could possibly cause cancer sometime down the line, again, if consumed excessively, right? It can essentially contaminate with certain carcinogens like benzidine, okay? Now, as you may or may not know, anytime a carcinogen is involved with anything we consume, it increases our risk for cancers, right? Because most of the time, you know, especially if you ever seen the documentary What the Health, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's still on Netflix or not, but oftentimes the doctors that are featured in that video, they talk about certain carcinogens that cause us to develop cancer later on in life. And the last two on this side, common items, I want to go over guar gum and soy lecithin. Now, guar gum is it's a powder, essentially used as an emulsifier, thickening, and stabilizing agent. You'll find it used in like chocolates or maybe baked goods, margarine, and even certain health supplements. Now, the thing about guar gum is, and even certain like soups, dressings, dairy products, right? It's used in a whole bunch of things. It could possibly cause digestive issues to the point where it could alter our, microbia. I think it's what's called, gut microbia, and or microbiome, something like that. I think both those words exist and apply. And it can also increase like inflammatory issues with our bowels. So you do want to be mindful about stuff like that. But again, though, that's also something that more studies are required for. Okay, when it comes to nutrition and even fitness, there's always like some study that there's studies that exist, but sometimes there's more studies, more continuous studies and research that need to be conducted. So as we put that info out there to you, we just want to make sure that we do say sometimes more studies may need to be applied. Some studies may need to be done, more research, more experiments, things like that. Now, soy lecithin is the same as guar gum, except for it's not used as a thickening agent, just as an emulsifier and stabilizer. Used in chocolates, baked goods, margarine, and again, certain health supplements. Soy lecithin may even be found in certain health supplements like protein powders, for example. The protein powder I use, soy lecithin is found in that. The protein powder I use is dimetized ISO 100 hydrolyzed, right? It's just something that I drink real quick after my workout to make sure I get protein and some carbs in, because I usually mix it in with fruit and I'll blend it to make a smoothie. So, but soy lecithin is found in that. Some protein powders have replaced soy lecithin with sunflower lecithin instead. Okay, so now on this side we have oils and some sugar alcohols. Okay, what I want to go ahead and go over are 3 specific oils that are typically commonly used in items, the items that we consume every day in our diets, foods, drinks, etc., etc. Not so much drinks, more so foods. But we have soybean, sunflower, and palm oil. Now, all 3 of these oils, right? They can be used obviously for cooking. Each of these have different purposes if we use them for cooking. Soybean, for example, is it's good for frying and baking, and it's typically also found in foods like margarine and mayonnaise. It's also high in vitamin E, which, as you may know, is the vitamin that it aids in our immune system. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, those being A, D, E, and K. But soybean oil is it has omega-6 fatty acids. That's the downside, and actually that's, to be honest, the downside to at least 2 of these oils, that being soybean and sunflower. It has a high count of omega-6 fatty acids, which if consumed excessively, it could sort of offset negatively the omega-3 fatty acids in your system. So the reason why that's bad is because, omega-3 fatty acids, if you remember from my fats video, is good for inflammation and helping to decrease our LDL cholesterol and increase HDL cholesterol. When omega-6 sort of, comes in abundance and, it offsets omega-3s, it can increase our risk of inflammation and even give us higher LDL. LDL cholesterol turns into plaque and then starts to latch onto our artery walls, and then goes ahead and puts us at risk for heart attacks, atherosclerosis, things like that, okay? So you do want to be mindful about stuff like that. Now, sunflower oil, it's the same as far as the omega-6 to omega-3 imbalance if consumed excessively. So you do want to be mindful about that. But as far as its use, it's good for frying, sauteing, and roasting. It's also an ingredient that's also found in mayonnaise, non-dairy applications, and even in certain plant-based burgers, right? It's like certain vegetarian burgers. And then we have palm oil. Now, palm oil in a lot of foods tends to be used as a preservative. Outside of being an oil that we can use to cook with, it's also used as a preservative. You may find palm oil in peanut butter. That's one of the most common things that we find it in, be it Jif or Skippy. And it's also found in margarine and fried foods, bread, etc., etc. It's stable at high temperatures when you're using it to cook with. And it also does contain antioxidants like vitamin E, right? As I mentioned, vitamin E earlier, is good for our immune system. Antioxidants help cancel out the free radicals that are in our bodies, more likely to prevent diseases and illnesses and things like that. So now again, palm oil though is high in saturated fat, which of course, again, saturated trans fats, where the cholesterol comes in, unfortunately. So if you excessively consume palm oil, you could put yourself at risk for that. See, the thing about peanut butter, for example, right? Peanut butter is good for you, right? It's good in protein, you know what I'm saying? But it does have a little bit of high fat content if you're not careful about how much you consume. One serving or maybe two is good enough usually for the day, because peanut butter typically tends to have that much fat in it. But it's got a mixture of everything, like, peanut butter, especially Skippy, if I remember. I don't know so much about Jif, but I've always eaten Skippy as a kid growing up, and Skippy has a mixture of everything, like, as far as fatty acids go, or just fats in general. It's got saturated and trans fats, moderate content. I'm not gonna say high, but it's got moderate amounts of, saturated and trans fats, but it also has the unsaturated fats too, that being the poly and mono unsaturated, which, as you may know, are the ones that help decrease our LDL and increase our HDL. But again, it's all about balance, right? One type of fat can easily cause an imbalance to the other type of fat. So you do want to be careful still, Peanut butter, see the thing about, hydrogenation, which is what peanut butter even goes through. Hydrogenation is the process where, you have something that's liquid and hydrogen molecules are added to that liquid to turn it into a solid, which is how you get margarine, for example, right? Margarine used to be liquid, used to be completely, liquid, and then once hydrogen molecules were added to it, it then becomes a just solid, just tub of fat. Even though margarine though is one of the healthier types of, items that you can eat and cook with, right? Margarine is said to be healthier than even butter. Bad thing about that is it tends to increase the fatty content. And now we have our sugar alcohols. They're a little different in the sense that if you ever notice, certain type, for example, many of us chew gum. That's the biggest example I could come up with, probably the best one. Many of us chew gum, right? Whether it be 5 gum, Trident, whatever. Oftentimes, those gums come with one of these here sugar alcohols that end in O, right? OL. And I just happen to, one of my favorite ones to chew on is the 5 gum. The 5 gum has, I believe it's xylitol, and there's some other gums that have maltitol in them. Now, if you consume, any items that have these in it, and it ends up giving you digestive issues, you may have found your answer as to why. So just about all of these here, if consumed in excess, can cause digestive issues. Issues being like diarrhea, for example, like loose stools, digestive discomfort, just like stomach pains as a whole. Erythritol is the first one. Now these are actually naturally found in foods like grapes, melons, and fermented items like cheese and beer. So it's also a sugar substitute. It's they're found in cakes and desserts, sports drinks, and I already mentioned chewing gum, right? Not so much bubble gum, but chewing gum specifically, like the 5 and the Trident and the Extra and things like that. Now it is low calorie, okay? So it doesn't necessarily promote tooth decay, as oral bacteria doesn't metabolize it so easily. So it's not so much bad for your teeth. Could it be? Maybe. But I would argue that you'd have to consume like a whole lot, or you'd have to, for example, in the case of gum, you'd have to chew so much gum. I mean, like you'd have to chew like so many pieces in order for it to really affect you. It'll probably, chances are you'll likely get digestive issues first before you experience any kind of tooth or oral decay from any of these sugar alcohols, especially erythritol. Now the next one I want to go into is maltitol. So maltitol is a sweetener texture, and it gives moisture effects. And they're used in, of course, still chewing gum, but they're also used in ice cream and certain baked goods. So now the thing with maltitol, it is generally safe, but again, it could cause digestive issues, especially if consumed in large quantities. So, experts do suggest limiting your intake between 10 to 15 grams per day with an upper limit of 30 grams per day. So, unless of course you have known issues, then, you're gonna wanna consume even less than that. Now, lactitol is a confectionery and bulk sweetener. So as you can imagine, it's likely used in certain candies and chocolates. Specifically when it comes to candy, the sugar-free types. Because lactitol could serve as somewhat of a sugar substitute in certain food items, depending on what item we're talking about here. But, it also does not promote tooth decay, and, it's non-absorbing by oral bacteria. So, it doesn't absorb any, calories that would come from it. Oftentimes lactitol, chewing gum as a whole in general, oftentimes they don't have any calories, or they might have like very minute calories that's not even worth tracking, like maybe like 5 calories or something that you get out of a stick of chewing gum, like 5 gum or something like that. It's not really worth tracking that much. So, but you still do want to be mindful about overconsumption, because lactitol could cause digestive issues. Also, the thing with lactitol is, because it's not easily digested, again, not everybody, some of you, digestive comfort, that being like loose stool or diarrhea, because it's not easily digested. It happens to be one of those sugar alcohols that runs right through you. And then last but not least, we got xylitol. Now, xylitol is it's a sweetener rather, that's used in sugar-free chewing gum, baked goods, and let's see what else, candies, the cakes and desserts, and some nut butters too. Okay. Now, and even some protein bars. That brings me up to a good point, because I used to eat protein bars before I, switched over to getting protein powders and, mixing them up into smoothies. Certain protein bars, like for example, the Pure Protein, right? Pure Protein bars, that's one that I used to eat many years ago right after a workout. I would stop at like a gas station or maybe a Walmart or whatever and get me like a pack, just so that I have enough to be able to take one with me so that I would eat after I work out. Pure Protein, it has some of these sugar alcohols in it, right? So it may have good protein in it, maybe even some carbs for replenishment of the glycogen that you went ahead and expended, but you still do want to be mindful about this. See, with me, there were a couple times where after eating a Pure Protein bar specifically, I might have digestive issues. Not so much to the point of diarrhea or anything, just discomfort. You know what I'm saying? So once I stopped eating Pure Protein bars and switched over to certain protein powders, it was much better for my system. Excessive intake of xylitol, though, besides bloating and diarrhea, in dogs, it may cause hypoglycemia, as well as liver failure. I guess it's something that's, good to know if, there happens to be some type of dog food that maybe, for those of you that have dogs out there, have pets, if y'all have dogs, right, and you get certain foods for them, maybe it's worth, checking the ingredients to making sure that there's no xylitol in it. I wrote this because I wanted to go ahead and go over this here, app that I use. Now, before I go into it, I'm not sponsored by it or nothing like that. Okay, it's just, it's an app that I do want to promote though, because it's something that I use, when I'm wanting to go a lot, and I pick up groceries and things like that. When I want to know how good something is, or even how bad something is, there's this app called Yuka. Now, Yuka's really good. So far, they do rate most things. There's certain things that they don't rate, like certain items that are high in protein, as well as certain, they even do more than just food too. They do even beauty products, right? They do hair products, lotions, skin products, right? But, again, there's still it's a work in progress also. They rate a lot of things, but there's some things that they can't quite rate yet. It's completely free. You bring the app up and you scan an item, you scan the item's barcode, and what it'll do is it'll give you a rating out of 100. And what'll happen is, in that rating, it will tell you if there's something to be concerned about. It'll tell you what it is, right? Like if an item rates bad, if it rates really poorly, then it'll tell you, okay, this is why it rates poorly. This particular ingredient right here is an endocrine disruptor, right? That's something else, you want to be mindful about ingredients. That's why I put this together. I wanted to talk about just the common ones, but there are some other ingredients, obviously, that I couldn't cover in this here short video. So, otherwise it'd be a really long one. But, certain ingredients can disrupt our endocrine systems as well. have potential to lead to cancers. Some have carcinogens in them. Anything that rates, because they have their rating system is it's kind of like, scaled a little bit. So for example, if you have an item that rates like a 40 out of 100, it may be poor for you, but not completely bad, right? Bad would be something that's like 0 out of 100, of course. It's gonna tell you that's bad for you. Something that's like, I don't know, I've seen 30 out of 100, and that's bad too. But anything like 40 to 49 is usually just poor. It's something that, you may not want to consume excessively, but, it's not terrible for you. Anything that rates 50 out of 100, I believe it's like 50 to about 60, 50 to 59, something like that out of 100, then it's going to be considered good for you, right? Or maybe I think even up to like 70, 50 to 70 maybe, that'll be considered good. And from what I've noticed since I've used the app, anything over 70, right? Anything over 70 out of 100 will be considered excellent. It'll give you an excellent rating. Now again, if there's anything to be concerned about, then it will tell you, like for example, maybe an item that you're scanning is, it scans like a 58 out of 100, right? But even though it gives you a 58, you still want to be mindful about the sodium, for example, right? Just something I've seen, since I've used the app, just as an example. Maybe an item has high sodium content if consumed excessively. Or maybe an item is a little too fatty, like maybe too much trans fats or too much saturated fats. Maybe an item has too much sugar. It's a great app to use, you know what I'm saying? When you're out and about, you're shopping. We all want to be mindful of what it is we're putting in our systems, right? So, and again, sometimes we put things in our system anyway that, maybe says it's good, but, isn't always, right? There was that whole, like for a while, actually, starting a few years back, there was, a whole thing about organic foods. Like how much different is organic foods, over regular food. An argument could still be made that organic may be the better way to go because, organic foods typically don't have the pesticides and things sprayed over them, especially when we're talking about produce, fruits and veggies. Nutrition-wise, like nutrition facts and things like that, maybe there's not much difference there, but all up to y'all, you know what I'm saying? We all, weigh our options, we just pick the best option for us and our families, okay? But other than that, I want to go ahead and put that out there, download Yuka and, start using it, man, you won't be disappointed. I mean, like I said, they can't rate everything, but they do food, drinks. They also do rate skin and hair products, cosmetics. My mother actually told me about it, and ever since she did, I've been using it ever since. That's gonna be pretty much it, y'all. This has been the ingredients list. Like I said, I know there's a lot more ingredients. Make sure you do your research on them. I couldn't cover everything in this video, obviously, but, make sure you do your research and, make the best decision for you and your peoples. If you liked my video, make sure to give it a like, a thumbs up. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, make sure you hit my comment section. I do check them frequently, so, make sure you hit that up too. And of course, give me a subscribe too. I really appreciate it. I will see y'all on my next one, and y'all take care. Have yourselves a great rest of y'all day or evening.